All right, everyone, continuing now with the notes for Chapter 10, picking up with Section 6 of your notes, talking about the responsibilities of PBS in terms of what it provides for PBS as a whole and for its particular stations that it services. Two key responsibilities. First, to accept or to reject programs, and the other is to schedule the accepted programs. These are the ones that are a part of the core schedule that it makes available to all of the PBS stations. PBS maintains rules for on-air crediting of PBS program funders to prevent violations of FCC underwriting regulations and to ensure against public television appearing to be too commercial. So here is the key difference between underwriting and advertising. Advertising in the form of a paid commercial usually contains what's called a call to action. What does that mean? Basically, what that means is that commercial advertisements are seen to have three basic elements that are included in them. Number one, it will include some sort of information about pricing of products or services. Number two, it will tend to have some sort of superlative statement about the product or service, such as, we're the best, we are better than the competition, we make guarantees on these particular products and services that they will do these certain things. The third thing would be urging people to respond to the announcement that's being made, whether it's to call the business or to visit the business, go to a website, to purchase something, and to do it within a certain time period. Sale information also cannot be included in a non-commercial announcement. So the call to action is, by and large, basically the ideas of getting the viewer to respond to something within the announcement, to make a call, to go to a place of business, to visit a website, to purchase something. But the superlative aspect and information on pricing and things like that are also prohibited in non-commercial content. The broadcasting service has continued to move towards a for-profit model, however, particularly in its online content. And in doing so, the new media aspect for PBS has been very much a way that they can compete with other services out there in terms of revenue generation and being able to provide more traditional commercial announcements and commercial content within the things that it does off of the airwaves. PBS has been changing its on-air guidelines for underwriting credits to more closely resemble those of commercial broadcasting. It used to just be basically they would have a graphic or a slate of something, the name of a business, or perhaps the logo of a business, while talking about the business in rather matter-of-fact sort of terms. But nowadays, you can see what does look to be like commercials, but basically they're image pieces for a particular business, talking about the not so much the products or services, but they will talk about what the company does. They will talk about how long the company has been around, those sorts of things. You can also hear in an underwriting announcement kind of a positive message sort of thing, where, you know, the business is trying to be a integral part of the community, that sort of thing. Experimentation of internal promotion material in PBS programs has been happening as well. Generally, you'll see this in terms of graphic crawls or perhaps a picture-in-picture sort of thing promoting some other content that PBS offers. PBS will also warn stations in advance of programs that contain offensive language or sensitive scenes. because of the nature of the content, it doesn't necessarily violate certain indecency rules that the FCC has, but it is something that because of the educational or informational nature of the program, that those sort of things can be seen and heard on PBS stations. But at the same time, there are things that PBS is going to make the affiliates aware of, so that if they wanted to censor on their own end, they could. The day-to-day management: the executive vice president sets policy and oversees content. Other managers assist in day-to-day activities. As far as satellite distribution, broadcast operations manages the daily details of the national schedule, and PBS now delivers instructional and general audience services via direct-to-home satellite channels. Some of these are those digital sub-channels that we talked about earlier. There's on-demand stuff that is also available from PBS, especially with the educational aspect of things, where PBS has long been a place where you can actually find content that, depending on your situation, you might be able to use for high school or college credit. And PBS has a system in place to allow those things to be available. Fundraising assistance: Station Independent Program, SIP. This is what schedules and programs 3 main on-air fundraising drives a year, commonly known as pledge drives. These are ones that are set up by PBS that stations can integrate into its own local pledge drives. Programs with emotional payoff: not necessarily those programs with the largest audiences, tend to generate more and higher pledges. So you will notice many times when a PBS station is doing a pledge drive that you will find a lot of concert type of content. You will find a lot of speeches and talks on various subjects that are made available. Sometimes they will showcase some of the more popular programming content. Those sort of things are what generally makes it on the air during pledge drive season on PBS. Now let's talk about various types of station licenses. These are the different types of groups that might hold a non-commercial television license. Community licenses are held by nonprofit community corporations created for the purpose of constructing and operating a public television station. Many feel that community stations are the most responsive type of licensees, and they have traditionally derived a higher proportion of their operating support from fundraising activities. So these are groups that form together, nonprofit organizations, specifically for the purpose of providing public television, community licenses. Now, also, community licenses lean toward higher production values. They are producers of network-delivered programs, and they have tended to attract larger local audiences than other types of non-commercial licensees, again, because they care about the quality of the content. It's not a group that does something else and then, they also happen to do public television. These guys are in it for the sake of public television itself. So they want the content to be something that they can be proud of in showcasing, and they put the best content they possibly can out there for the public. Another type of station license is the university license. Stations are as a natural outgrowth of their traditional role of providing extension services within their states. And they tend to produce local newscasts and weekly public affairs or cultural programming. And many times they will do this using student staff. In the case of UNC television, it's a much more professional sort of setup, but many times with the university licensees, you're going to find that they do use students to help in the educational experience for the students taking courses at a particular school. Public school licensees provide new learning experiences for students in elementary school classrooms. Many of these stations produce content in standard definition and then convert the video to HD. Why? Because budgets. So many times these school licensees will have older equipment and need to work with what you have and then produce the content that they need to. They will obtain most of their programming from national, state, and regional suppliers with limited local content. State television agencies are legislatively created public broadcasting agencies. They're providing new classroom experiences for the state's school children, along with public affairs and cultural programming. So many times the state-run public television stations do have more of an education sort of focus. They're active in the production and national distribution of educational programming, and state legislatures may account for 3/5 of their operating budgets. So it is something that a local or county or usually a state government will be involved in making sure that things stay on the air. Some similarities and differences in the various types of licensees. Community representatives try to balance local power groups and foster underwriting. So very much that sort of community fundraising sort of atmosphere. University boards tend to leave station professionals free to carry out their jobs within broad guidelines. Certain amount of autonomy that can happen within this system. School boards may pay too little attention to their responsibilities as licensees, sometimes out of ignorance, because again, they're a school board that happens to also be running a TV station, and sometimes not necessarily aware of things like how much it costs to operate a TV station or the kinds of content that people are going to be attracted to tune in to watch the station. State boards try to protect their stations from inappropriate political influences and drastic budget cuts, so it becomes a bit of a pawn in the political discourse of a government. And public affairs programs, and those of interest only to specialized smaller audiences, will make it on the air. However, they do not always appeal to corporations and must be funded by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, by PBS itself, or by certain foundations. All right, so let's talk now about program production, and let's raise a question that we alluded to at the beginning of the chapter. Has PBS become superfluous in the broadcasting and entertainment landscape? In other words, we have so many different places that we can get similar types of programming. Cable networks such as Discovery Channel, History Channel, all sorts of different educational channels that are available online. Well, cable has 92% penetration in the United States, where PBS has 99% penetration through over-the-air broadcast television, over-the-air broadcast television, I should say. PBS's ratings are 2 to 4 times larger than its cable competition. Now, cable is rising and broadcast is lowering, but you still have the possibility of reaching more people through broadcast over-the-air television than you do through cable. More people are hopping online, and there is that availability. But again, as we've talked about, PBS and PBS stations have actually embraced the online world and made a lot of content available there. As far as program financing goes, a PBS program may have a single financial backer, or it might have several. And PBS may fund a project, but many programs must find their own backing in order for the content to be produced and then make it onto the airwaves. So that involves fundraising, looking for underwriters, seeking out grants from foundations or from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Program assessment fees. These are paid by PBS member stations, and it is a funding process that makes it so that newly offered productions could be snapped up without any sort of delay. Stations are assessed in proportion to their market size, and these are the programs that, by and large, whenever you see in the underwriting announcements that the program was funded by quote-unquote viewers like you, because station money is involved there, and when station money is involved, by and large, that is going to include viewer donations. The major producers of programming content include some of the major PBS stations. You'll see a lot of stuff coming out of WGBH in Boston in particular. Matter of fact, they recently just changed their branding to be called GBH Productions. But you will also see content from several other stations across the country. WNET in New York, WQED in Pittsburgh, KQED in San Francisco, and several others. The Chicago station, also a big contributor of public programming. Commercial independent producers will also get involved and create content. They do need to be careful in terms of making sure that the content is not too commercial in any sort of way. But you do see mainstream producers that do get involved in public TV. British and other international producers also getting involved. There's been a lot of content from the BBC in particular that has shown up in public television, and from various other British entities, especially dramas and comedies that make their way onto PBS stations. A balance in selection. Responsibility for acquiring programs falls to one of several content managers, including the directors of factual programming, fiction and performance programming, and children's programming. So those folks are the ones that will look at the available options and decide what makes it onto the air. Now, by law, PBS can order programs to be produced, but PBS itself does not produce any programming. Something to keep in mind. To better regulate the flow of new production into the national schedule, PBS established the Public Television Pipeline, a management system for monitoring and coordinating all program development activity from the proposal stage through delivery to PBS. This is the way that when you want to get your show made available to PBS stations, you would use this system. Corporate pressure. Often the underwriting corporations require that a program be played within its fiscal year, irrespective of audience and schedule needs. So one of the things that's kind of a sticky wicket when it comes to getting funding for its operations is that many times the underwriters will want to make sure that programs are being played within a time frame that is convenient to the underwriter. So there is still a little bit of pressure that comes from the corporate world when it comes to the content that you see on PBS. It's just that it's not so overtly commercial in nature, because again, we're not airing commercial announcements, we're airing underwriting announcements. There's also pressure from stations. Stations may refuse to air a program at the time fed because their programmers at those stations decide, well, any of a number of different things, including the lacking of primetime quality, that the program contains too much profanity or violence, that a program would occupy a time slot that the station wants for its own programs, or that the show would just have little appeal for its local viewers. Because again, meeting the needs of the audience in your local market is paramount to a local public station. Program rights. PBS negotiates for extra plays. Program indicators want fewer airings to retain maximum control and resale potential for a program. So there is a bit of a struggle between those that provide programming and PBS in order for PBS to be able to get bang for its buck, if you will. Syndicated and local programming. Well, let's start off with non-commercial syndication. ITV instructional programming is in abundant supply. These are the folks that actually do the teaching content, the programs that I mentioned earlier that high schoolers, college students might be able to watch and participate and receive actual credit for taking in those programs. Non-commercial adult education programming geared for college studies showed interest from general audiences. So even if you're not taking a class or trying to receive credit, you can enrich your own life with some of this type of programming content. Now, as far as commercial syndication goes, public TV stations sometimes negotiate individually for program packages with syndicators. Sometimes they join with other public stations through regional associations to make group buys. So UNC-TV might team up with other public broadcasters in other states in order to collectively together get rights to air a program. As we mentioned before, British dramas are also things that PBS has gotten itself involved with, as well as various documentaries and artistic motion pictures, things that, again, might not necessarily be as attractive to the more commercial media outlets. These can be expensive for stations to obtain. So that idea of finding the underwriters necessary to be able to purchase the content or to get programming that appeals to the public so that they would give viewer donations. It's that balance of providing what is needed in the public interest, providing what people want, and being able to fund the things that they want to provide. Local production is lessening in quantity due to the fact that you have an increase in network and syndicated programming that is available. Also, the increase of cost to produce content at a certain quality, where you have seen public television stations cutting back in resources, in cutting back in personnel. They don't always have the ability to be able to create the local content that they would like to. You also have more comprehensive treatment to local matters than what you would see on commercial television whenever public television tends to produce something for its airways. During election seasons, many times on public TV stations, you will find debates and forums for various candidates for office that don't get as much attention in the commercial media landscape. And as this class generally happens around election season, you definitely would see that as you pay attention to what's going on PBS airwaves. So this is a good point for us to take a break, and we will finish up the notes for Chapter 10 over on Part C